Explain why Tsar Nicholas II abdicated in February 1917. You may use the following in your answer: the First World War, mutiny of the Petrograd garrison. You must also use information of your own. 12 marks. Here's the mark scheme for this question, which you can find out about in more detail in the overview video. Now, we know that 6 marks are available for AO2, which is your analysis of causation. Remember that the question has asked you to explain why. That means that you need to think about the factors and things, events, developments that led to this. So what do you think caused it? Now, you can use the 2 stimulus points given to you in the question. You don't have to, but you can. Just remember though that if you do use them, it's also really important that you use evidence of your own knowledge, because if you only use the stimulus points, you hit what's called a mark ceiling, and that means that you can't actually score in the higher bands if you're only using the information given to you in the question. That brings us on to AO1, which is also worth 6 marks, and that is for you bringing in your knowledge and understanding of the period. When you're bringing in these factors, you need to show the examiner that you know the topic really well to explain this causation. Here are the bottom 2 bands for this question. Now, you might notice that we're seeing words like straightforward, not developed, general, lack of organisation. That means that maybe you've listed some factors that contributed to this event, but you haven't really explained them. So to show the examiner that you know the topic really well, you need to explain that factor in enough detail. That might mean bringing in evidence from your own knowledge to just expand on it a little bit, maybe making comments that take that factor and link it back to the question. In terms of organisation, it should be quite easy for the examiner to follow, so quite a nice logical structure where you move from one factor to the next to the next. Also, if you're scoring in these 2 bands, it might mean that you haven't brought in enough of your own knowledge. Remember what we said about the stimulus points. It's great to use them, but just make sure that you're showing the examiner that you know the topic well enough to bring in bits of information from the stuff that you already know. These are the top 2 bands. Now here we're seeing words like analytical, consistently directed to the question, coherent, logical. So firstly, in order to be analytical, you need to have stated the factor that you think was an important cause and then explained it. So you've brought in bits of your own knowledge. You've explained why that caused the event. So make it really clear what you're arguing. That then will make it much easier for the examiner to follow your structure, to really understand what you're arguing. That way, the examiner knows that you know this topic really well. You're confident enough with the material to make a really well-justified argument, and one that analyses exactly what the question has asked you to do. There are lots of bits of information and evidence you could have brought in to make your points here, so as long as what you say is relevant and correct, the examiner will accept it. But let's take a look at an example. So one point you might have made could have built upon the stimulus point of the First World War. You use your own knowledge to say that Nicholas took personal command of the army fighting in the First World War. Then you need to link that back to the question, so explain why that caused this event. You say that its failures reflected directly upon him as a result of him being the commander, and therefore discredited his competence as a ruler. So you can see there we've got our own knowledge, so that's our AO1, and we've linked it back to the question to show that we can be analytical, so that's our AO2. Take a look at the rest of the points here though to see if there's anything you could have added to your answer.